All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, Nader is going to give a presentation about patching and updating based on NTT DATA Federal's A.P.P.L.E eBook um, that Nat Bongiovanni wrote about cybersecurity. Um, I'll let Nader take it away after this, but if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And if you are interested in seeing the first two A.P.P.L.E eBook webinars, they're on our YouTube channel, and this one will be posted on the YouTube channel following the presentation. Nader, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you, Katie, for the introduction. Welcome to our webinar talking about Apple and specifically patching and updating. Real quick, what we're going to go through, we'll just go through a quick introduction and then just a refresher about Apple. And then we're going to dive deeper into patching and updating, benefits of patching. We're going to look at past patch exploits that happened and talk about a patch management process and explain what a patch management process is, and then have some time for Q&As if there's any. As Katie mentioned, any questions that pop up, just put them in the chat, and then we're gonna answer all those questions. So before we jump into our topic today, I would like to give just a quick brief introduction about myself. My name is Nader Nassif. I'm currently a compliance and security specialist that supports writing to any new cybersecurity opportunities we have within NTT Data. Prior to NTT Data, I have worked in the IT realm for over 10 years. I started as a system admin. Over time, I specialized in becoming a Linux system admin. After 4 years, approximately, after four years of becoming system admin, I switched to the security side of the house. I served as a government contractor for HHS, providing security support for on-prem environments and cloud environments as well. So to say the least, I have experience working in patch management, whether it was on the team that deployed the patches and implemented them into the environment, as well as the team that scanned for vulnerabilities and exploits within the environment. Again, just to go real quick about what is Apple and what it stands for. Like I said, it was an ebook that our CTO, Nat Bongiovanni, wrote, and what these webinar series are covering. Apple is an acronym for Authenticate, Patch and Update, Protect Data, Limit Privilege, and Enable Anti-Malware. Today, we're going to be diving into the patch and update aspect of Apple. We do have a previous webinar that was talking about Authenticate, and we're going to have future webinars to touch base on the other aspects within Apple. So going to patching, what is patching or patches? So patches are simply put just updates that are pushed to address any sort of vulnerability or enhance performance. Patches can be applied really to anything that we can think of, whether it's an operating system, any device like a network device, or even just applications that we use in our everyday life. So in simple terms, patches are applied to laptops, mobile devices, servers, something like Adobe Acrobat, and several more. Now, not all patches that we see are the same or serve the same purpose. There are several different types of patching, as you guys can see. We have like security patches, which usually are released to address a vulnerability, and most of the time they are very crucial to be applied to the system. Examples of other patches or types of patches could be service packs, which are usually a bundle of patches put in together and served as a full package to be applied to a system. Most of the time we do see those within Microsoft Windows. And then there's patches that are called hot fixes, which is usually a very small patch that is has a purpose of addressing a specific issue or improving performance on a system. And usually there's very minimal impact on the system when we apply this patch. And then we have OS patches, which could be an upgrade to the operating system that's running on the system or addressing just an OS issue in specific. And these are not the limits for the different types of patches that are released. There's a lot of more categories within the patches, but these usually are the main types that we are going to see, or the common ones that we would see in our everyday lives. So going from there, we're like, all right, so we know what is patching and what are the different types of patching, but is it really that patching makes a difference? Do I really need to patch my system all the time? My answer is always going to be, the short answer is always going to be yes. Patching will make a difference and it is important. However, planning and managing patches is also important before applying any patch, which we will dive deeper into in a moment. But keeping a system out of date is very dangerous and puts your whole environment at risk, really. Giving the smallest backdoor for an attacker to access your resources could result in a big loss of whether it's sensitive data, profits, or simply more access to other resources within the environment. By having a good patch management process and plan, could add more security to your environment and provide stability and avoid also downtimes, and keeps you in compliance as well. So going from there, learning a little bit of the benefits of patching and what it helps with within our environment. Let's look real quick at two most popular exploits that happened due to the lack of patching in the past. The These two, one of them is called WannaCry ransomware, and the other one was Log4j vulnerability. Now, some of you might have experienced those in your workplace, or even personal devices might have been affected with those. But let's dive a little bit deeper into each one of those and see like the exploits and what they how they affected environments. So the first one was WannaCry. WannaCry ransomware started spreading rapidly around May of 2017. It mainly affected Windows devices where it would encrypt files on the hard drive, making them impossible to access. Then it demands a ransom payment in order to decrypt them. WannaCry was spreading through a flaw in Windows Server Message Block, SMB in short, protocol. Interestingly enough, Microsoft did release a patch to address the vulnerability, and the patch was released on March 14th of 2017. So there was almost 2 months from when the patch was released to when the WannaCry ransomware was starting to spread around. And Microsoft did flag that patch as critical as well. So how the ransomware worked was that once the file was infected, there was really no remedy or saving the file unless there was a backup present for that file. Then you can revert from the backup. Other than that, it would just say that you have to pay a ransom in order to decrypt the file. And even if you were given and paid the ransom, there was little to no chance to gaining access back to that file, and it was just all just a scam to get money out of users. And all of this really would cause the affected person or environment to lose data from their systems, added expenses if you would have decided to pay the ransom, and potentially downtime depending on the criticality of the file affected. And then going into the next exploit or famous exploit that happened in the past was Log4j, the Log4j vulnerability. Now, this was a little bit different than WannaCry ransomware, and we'll go into it in a moment. But real quick, if you're not familiar with Log4j, Log4j is an open source logging tool. It's used by several applications, and it was mainly designed by Apache and mainly used by Apache. However, there's a lot of other applications that do use Log4j as well. So with this vulnerability, an attacker could potentially break into the system. They could steal passwords and logins, extract data from your system, and even infect the rest of your network if they are able to get access to the rest of the environment through the affected system. The case here was a little bit different than WannaCry. Log4j was a zero-day vulnerability, meaning that there was no patch available when Log4j was discovered, or Log4j vulnerability was discovered. The first sighting of Log4j vulnerability, it was discovered on the Alibaba website when security researchers were just doing their daily scans, and they did discover the vulnerability on November 24th of 2021. At the peak of the vulnerability activity, there was more than 100 attacks every minute, affecting more than 40% of all businesses, like business networks globally. Some of these businesses, big names, were Minecraft, the video game, if you're familiar with it, Twitter, and even Cisco. Now, Apache did roll a patch to address the vulnerability. However, the patch did not mitigate the vulnerability right away, and Apache had to release 3 more patches until they were able to fully mitigate the vulnerability. So in total, Apache had to release 4 patches over, I believe it was around 2 weeks of a time frame until they were able to mitigate Log4j vulnerability. To give you a quick example of something also with Log4j, prior to working with NTT, when I was contracting for HHS, we did get affected by Log4j vulnerability. For us, we had one tool that was utilizing Log4j, and out of all tools, it was actually our wiki. And with that being said, our wiki was the only system as well that had access to the internet, that someone could attack us through the wiki. And given that the criticality that Log4j will give access to people, to the attacker, give them access to the rest of the environment, it became very critical in our situation. We did have to power down the system completely since there was no mitigation for the vulnerability yet, in order just to protect ourselves from any attackers that would be able to get their hands on any sensitive information or data. In our case, it was the wiki, so it wasn't something that could really affect our productivity on like everyday basis. However, if it was a web server or something like that, that would bring the whole system down, which would have caused bigger issues. So knowing the danger, like how dangerous Log4j was, and in the future, just knowing how sometimes some of these vulnerabilities could be very critical, is very important within our patch management process, and just understanding the whole process in general. So with us going through some of the exploits and popular exploits that happened in the past, and understanding as well patching in general and the benefits of patching and how dangerous it could be if we're being out of date, let's look at what is a patch management process, right? And how can we put a process in place in order to mitigate all of this and just be able to patch our systems and stay up to date. So we got to keep in mind as well that each one of us has a different sized environment. We have a different number of systems, right? We could have one environment that has around 50 systems that we're handling, where we have another environment that could have over 200 systems. So with that being said, just keep in mind, this is like a high level process. This is kind of like a guide that you can take, carve it however you want to just adapt it to your environment, and reflect it there will be the most effective within your environment. Within the patch management process, there's really 6 steps that we would look at here. Our asset management, just understanding what needs to be patched, patch monitoring for the available patches and what is being released from the vendors, patch prioritization, understanding that not all patches have the same criticality and not all of them need to be applied immediately, patch testing, just testing our patches within a controlled environment, patch deployment, where we deploy the patches to our production environment, and then lastly, patch documentation, where we document our patching activities. So let's dive a little bit deeper into our patch management process. So firstly, our asset management. When it comes to asset management, having an inventory of all your devices would definitely help, not just for patching, but knowing what's really in your environment, right? Having a simple spreadsheet with system names, manufacturer, operating system that's running could be a very simple way to keep track of your inventory. Very simple step like this could be easily overlooked. However, it can go a long way within your asset management and just keeping track of your inventory. What the inventory entails, it's not just simply we have a number of systems that we're going to put in there, but anything that we're really going to have to manage, right? So it could be our servers, our network devices, if we're issuing laptops to team members, mobile devices, all of this would go within our inventory, and all of this would go into our patch management process as well. So now we identified all the devices that we need. We identified everything within our environment. We know our operating systems that are running, even applications that we have that's running within our environment. Going into the next step would be our patch monitoring. So there's a lot of different ways to keep track of patches, and some of these might be using a patch management tool, for example, which would show you what patches are missed on systems and track any new release patches from vendors as well. Another tool could be a vulnerability scanner. Granted, a vulnerability scanner is not going to show you new patches being released. However, it will scan for vulnerabilities and potential exploits within your environment, which could lead you to the patches that need to be deployed within your environment as well. Or simply just manually tracking patch releases through newsletters, or like knowing that Windows Patch Tuesday, that's when patches get released for Microsoft, or subscribing to, like I said, newsletters from vendors as well. And then from there, we would go into patch prioritization. So with the other two steps being covered, now we got to understand that not every single patch that gets released needs to be applied to a system immediately, right? Setting a time frame, also depending on the criticality of the patch, would help with the process. So as you can see here, there's a time frame that we've taken from CISA on the criticality and the time to mitigate each vulnerability that we would have depending on the severity. Now, this table is just, again, a guideline. This could be adapted within your environment. Maybe within your environment, be like, I would like all the critical findings that we have to be addressed within 10 days or so or less. So again, this could be changed a little bit to adapt to your environment. Now, with this time frame, that doesn't mean that we have to wait these specific amount of days to address the patch. However, this is more like a deadline that we don't want to wait more than 15 days or so to address a critical patch. And with that being said, we also want to understand each patch, right? So for example, a critical vulnerability or patch could be addressing a big exploit, like the ones we discussed earlier, like Log4j or WannaCry, where a low severity patch could be just addressing a minor system performance that could have minimal impact or significance even to your system. So understanding the severities of the patches, and also the purpose of each patch is very critical within our patch management process. Some patches as well would require a test run, right, before applying to your production systems, since it could affect the performance negatively, which leads me here to our next step within our patch management process, which would be patch testing. I would say, in my opinion, patch testing is a very crucial step in the patch management process. Having a test environment that could apply the patches to prior to production could save you a lot of downtime or performance instability. Just like how each one of our environments are different, each system is also different within our environment, based off of the purpose of the system, the applications that are running on it, and even just the workload that it handles every minute. So having a test environment to apply the patches on and monitor it for some time before pushing to production could save you time and effort in troubleshooting and just your deployment of patches. Again, to give you an example, this has really happened to me before on several different occasions, right? After pushing a patch into a test environment, I would notice that the system is becoming unstable or the application is not responding well to the new patch that was deployed, or simply a system is just not coming back up after applied the patch and rebooted the system. So having all of these, that this would happen within a test environment rather than production, um, is very helpful, because then we are dodging some downtime or any instability within our production environment. A lot of times we would see that, let's take, for example, we have a Windows web server that's running Apache, right? We can see that there was an OS patch released by Microsoft, and once you apply this patch to your system, now Apache is not responding or doesn't work the way it was prior to the patch. And it's simply because Apache did not update their code or their application to be compatible with the new released patch. So having a test environment that we discovered this within our test environment is a lot better, and there's a less risk doing that within the test environment rather than deploying this into production and then we're discovering all of these issues. So this highlights how important having a patch testing phase within our patch management process, how this could be very important. And then the next thing I would say, usually giving no less than 15 days or so between patching our test environment and then production environment will give us a lot of time to allow the new patch to be tested and confirm there is no instability within the systems that have ingested this patch. Now, with all that being said, of course, sometimes we might have to deviate from this timetable, right? Let's say there's a new exploit that has been discovered, something like, again, log4j or something like that, and we have to address the exploit by deploying the patch almost immediately. I would still say that there should be a plan that we would come up with to give ourselves some time between testing and production. Again, it doesn't have to be, we don't have to wait the 15 days, 10 days or so. It could be as much as just a day. But having that day at least gives us a chance to test that patch, making sure that it doesn't completely break the system or bring the system down. So again, even in the critical times and situations that could happen, we would still want to try to test the patch as much as possible before deploying to our production environment. So now we've reached the phase where we're going to deploy our patches into our production environment, after we've tested the patches to our test environment and we confirmed everything looks good, we don't have any issues. Now we're ready to go into our production environment. Some of the good practices that we want to have when we're pushing to our production environment is really to push the patches in stages. Meaning, so let's say we have 100 systems within our environment, for example. So pushing the patch to 50 systems per group, so let's say we have 2 groups of 50 or even 4 groups of 25, is a lot better than pushing that patch to all 100 systems at once. The reason why this is a good practice, because in an instance that an issue occurs with applying the patch or the system decides, again, it can't like boot up or something, it's going to be a lot easier to discover the system that got affected or is having a problem when we're pushing to groups rather than we push to the full 100 and then afterwards we're going back to make sure each and every system is back up and it's running as it should be. So again, having that group could save us some time within troubleshooting if needed. Now you're going to say, well, we already did the patch, deployed the patch within our test environment and everything worked fine. So why should we expect that there should be any issues when we're going to our production environment? And I agree with you. Yes, we have tested the patch. and we confirmed that everything was good. It didn't affect the system in any bad way. But again, remember that we mentioned that each individual system is very different, right? So each system could ingest the patch differently. And that's why we still proceed with caution when we're going within our production environment. Excuse me. So now that we know all of this, we know that we have our vendors when they release their patches, which we have covered within our second step within the patch management process, and we have set the time frame where when we're gonna test our patches, and then when we're gonna deploy to our production environment. And we know our inventory and how much it's going to take us to deploy the patches within to cover all of our inventory. That's the systems within our environment. Now we want to come up with a schedule, right? We want to have a set schedule that we're going to follow to deploy our patches. It doesn't have to be a schedule for a full year. Now, I would definitely recommend having your schedule for the full year ahead rather than scheduling like 2 month ahead or so. But if needed, we can do 6 months ahead and then the next 6 months or so. But having a schedule is going to help you, especially if, let's say, we're hosting systems to a customer or so, or just even for your internal environment, just having a schedule to follow is going to help plan like everything else within your tasks, or if you have times that you prefer not to have any downtime or the systems not being altered with. So then we can set our schedule based off of all of these things. So thinking of the times, let's say, for example, we'll be like, okay, we're going to have our test within our first week or so of the month, and that will cover our test environment. Picking like a specific date within the first week of the month. And then after that, we're going to have our production is going to go within our last month or so, last week within the month, same month or so. So that way we're giving ourselves that time frame between test and production to make sure everything looks good, everything is stable, and then we can push to production. As well as pick off-peak hours or after business hours as well when we're pushing our patches to avoid any downtime or any interruptions within our environment. So putting all of this together and just having that a base of a schedule to follow would definitely also improve your patch deployment process, and just having set times that you're going to follow throughout your whole year would be really beneficial within the environment. So after we've deployed our patches and everything looks good, we can be like, okay, we're done. Everything is good. Now we can start the process from the beginning again. Yes. However, I would always recommend adding the sixth step, which is the documentation. Documentation in the IT world is always very, very important, right? We always say we try to document as much as possible. Now, when it comes to patching, we're like, okay, so what are we going to document when it comes to patching? I would say having logs of the patches deployed could be very, very useful when it comes to troubleshooting. So to give you an example, let's say we have deployed 10 patches to a system, right, within our test environment. And then after we've deployed those 10 patches, we've noticed that our web server is having issues, and the application is not responding properly after we've deployed those patches. So having that log of patches deployed could help that we can go back, look at our log, see what were the patches deployed, and from there we can pinpoint which patch could be the issue or causing that issue, right? So that would help with our troubleshooting. That could be one example of documentation. Second, another example could be just simply documenting the patch process, right? What are we going to cover within our patch process? What are the steps that the team is taking to patch the systems? This could come in handy in, let's say, we have a new member within our team, and we're trying to show them our process for patching. Having a document that they can follow as a guideline could help a lot within the training process for that team member. A third one is documenting any troubleshooting steps that we've taken when we faced an issue with patching. I have definitely personally experienced this so many times that we would deploy a patch, and then you see issues, and then we have to troubleshoot those issues to mitigate it and bring the system back to its normal state. Documenting the steps that I've taken within the troubleshooting could help, because that issue could happen again, right? And it doesn't have to be that it would happen the next month again or so, or the next patching cycle, but it could happen next year or two. So documenting the troubleshooting steps, so then if that issue would occur again, then we have something to go back, refresh our memory, just see the steps that we've taken, to be able to help us with those troubleshooting steps. Or even if we have more than one member within our patching team, then they can share those documents and they can share the steps that they have taken together. And this would cover all of our steps really within our patch management process, and just having a good patch management process within our environment to address patching and updating within our environment. And with that not only wraps our patch management process, but also wraps our webinar for patching and updating. And I hope that everyone learned something here new that they could implement within their environment, or help them improve an existing process that they had for their environment. And now I'm going to open the floor for questions if anyone has any, and if anyone had any questions that they have put in the chat, we'll go over those as well.
Thank you, Nader. I have a couple questions that I will ask, and then if anyone has any more, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. The first one being, how should you prioritize critical patches?
Okay, that's actually a really good question. So usually with the prioritization for patching, when vendors release a patch, they usually put the severity or the criticality of the patch with it, right? So that would be our first cue of understanding the priority of that patch, right? Like if we have Microsoft released a critical patch, so we know that critical patch is very important for us to deploy as soon as possible, or like the first next chance that we get to patch or deploy that patch. Where if they release something with the criticality of low, it could really have like very minimal impact within our environment, and it's not that important to expedite the deployment of the patch. And the other thing is, a lot of times, if we're utilizing a vulnerability scanner, most of the time we will see a vulnerability and it's going to tie up to a patch that has been released. And from there, we can also prioritize that patch, understanding if it's very critical to be deployed into the environment, or it doesn't have that high of criticality for like a fast deployment within our environment.
Great, thank you. We have one question from the chat. Does it track other devices such as firewalls, routers, etc., as part of the inventory?
Yes. So I would say when we're keeping an inventory of our environment, putting anything within that environment, right? Let's say anything that has an IP address or an operating system or anything like that, that would fall within our inventory. Because even the firewalls and network devices, they are running at the end of the day an operating system. And these operating systems are going to require some patches. Cisco, for example, will always release patches if you're using Cisco devices within their community, and you would have to download those patches and address any vulnerabilities that they would have.
Great, thank you, Nader. Next question is there a process to testing patches?
So I wouldn't say there's like a specific process, right, to test the patches, but usually the structure of a test environment that you would like to have within the environment is almost to be mimicking your production environment. So let's say we have a database and we have a web server that we're running, then we would like to have in our test environment as well a database and a web server that are almost, if not a clone from each other. And that way, when we're testing the patches within our test environment, that would reflect almost 90% of how the production environment is going to ingest that patch as well. And it minimizes any new discoveries within our production environment when we're doing that patch.
Perfect. What to do if a patch causes a system disruption?
Okay. This one, it's almost like a scenario based, right? Like every time we're going to deploy a patch, something could happen and it's going to be different every time. It's not going to be the same. Simple troubleshooting of just looking at the logs of the system after we deployed the patch, understanding what's really not working or what's having an issue starting again after that patch could help with the troubleshooting. Opening a case with the vendor, whether it's the application or the operating system, just opening a case with the vendor, explaining the issue of what happened, and allowing them to help with the troubleshoot process could help as well in returning the system to a stable state. But when it comes really to our IT field and troubleshooting, every situation it could be very different than another one, and there's no really set steps that we would take to troubleshoot. But from my personal experience, I would say logs are always your best friend in looking at issues or what is having an issue of running stable. And don't be shy of opening support cases with the vendors. They usually, most of the time, have the answers that we're looking for.
Thank you. Okay, I have another question from the chat. Does it interrogate the devices for things such as installed software versions, like Java or Adobe, for example, to monitor for and identify end-of-life software?
So if we're running any vulnerability scanner within the environment, let's take, for example, Nessus, just because I also have personal experience with it. So I've seen it happen. Usually with vulnerability scanners, if you have something that's going to be out of life or end of support, it does show as a vulnerability. And that would help you keep track of those as well. Obviously, if it's going to be end of support or end of life, there's going to be almost no patches coming up for that application or operating system. We did see that with when I was with HHS again, we did have OSs that were reaching end of life, right? We were still running Windows Server 2012 or Red Hat 7, and it was reaching end of life, and there was no security patches being released for them anymore. Unfortunately, there's no way to work around it besides just simply taking the step of upgrading whatever is going to be an end of life and replacing it with something that's within support life, and we're able to get security patches and just patches in general for that application or operating system again.
Awesome, thank you. And then we have one last question. We have, hold on. Yeah, we have one last question. What are the long-term benefits and potential risks associated with automating the patching and updating process in an organization?
That's also a very good question. I think with how our technology is evolving, automation is becoming very huge within the IT realm, and there's always new ways that we can discover to automate, for, in this instance, patching, right? However, I personally wouldn't recommend that the process would be fully automated to the point that there's no any human interaction within it. Just again, because systems could ingest patches differently. How we would automate it, or how we can implement a little bit of an automation, utilizing patch management tools could help with that. With patch management tools, you can simply set schedules that's the time that I would like to search for new patches, or scanning the systems for any missing patches, setting a schedule on when it would deploy those patches to the systems. However, again, I would say there should be some human interaction where at least someone goes back, makes sure that all the patches were deployed, systems are all back up, nothing went wrong within that process. Of course, also setting up, if we're using one of those patch management tools, setting up alerts. Let's say if the process fails or gets interrupted or anything like that, setting up alerts to just alert the team that the process was not completed would help as well with keeping track of the automation process and that it's working properly.
Thank you very much, Nader, and thank you for everyone for attending the webinar this afternoon. It will be posted on the YouTube channel if you would like to watch it again. Have a great day.